Can you hear me? Wait, hello? Hello? All right. Sorry. It's okay. Alhamdulillah, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa la sharika lah. Praise be to God. I bear witness there is no other God beside God and he has no partner. Salam alaikum, everybody. My first sermon at San Jose Masjid. Mashallah, I feel blessed to be here. And also, Shabnam said that this was a prerequisite to me marrying her daughter. She's like, my daughter ain't marrying a man. Just kidding. I have no idea what I just did, sorry. All right, good start. Let's dive in. Just kidding. So the first topic I want to talk about is what I call autopilot submission. And I want to start with this. I had read this in a book once, and it really kind of clicked with me. It says, with time, vigilance tends to relax because all horrors are dulled by routine. And I know it's kind of wordy, but it reminded me of myself and a pattern I find myself always falling into. And I'll try to break it down. You're kind of living your life, going through your day-to-day routine, and then you incur a big consequence. And then you get this consequence and you reevaluate your life and you want to take your submission seriously because this consequence really shook you up. And you start being diligent with your submission, you start being vigilant with your submission, doing all your namazes on time, etc. And then as the years go by, as time goes on, you kind of forget what has happened to you, the horror of whatever consequence you incurred, and you'll eventually fall into the same trap and you make a mistake again, and it's this cycle. And it reminds me of this verse, bad weather friends, seek refuge of God, who's in the rejected. When adversity afflicts the people, they turn to their Lord, totally devoting themselves to him. But then as soon as he showers them with mercy, some of them revert to idol worship. And this is a really bad human tendency I think we all have. And what I want to talk about, this autopilot submission, I see it as that time where we fall into complacency before we kind of get shooken up again. So autopilot submission to me is when there's a disconnect between what we say and what we mean. And I'll give an anecdote. When I was in 6th grade, our first day of class, everyone had to go around the room and we had to say our name but also start with an adjective with the same letter as our name. So like Rod would be radical Rod. Eunice would be like youthful Eunice. You guys get it. So, and so we were all going around and this one kid, he's like, excited Eric. With like no expression or anything. Like he just sounded like he wanted to die. And he was like, excited Eric. And it reminded me, like when I was thinking about this sermon, it reminds me of like, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. It's just like when you kind of do your namaz, you're not even thinking. Even worse is when, has anyone ever like held their namaz off till there's like 1 minute left? You know you're in the wrong when Subhana Rabbi al-A'la is one syllable. So that's what this sermon's about. And the idea first came to me, God tells us every night we meditate. And so, one of the most common forms I meditate is I read the Quran. And every night I was reading the Quran and it was, like I wasn't reading the Quran. I was reading the words, but my mind was like either going over what I was thinking about that day or whatever. And it was just like get through those pages and then you close the Quran and whatever. And it's funny, I think Eunice in his sermon, he was saying, meditate isn't where you're like doing this and thinking about nothing. Like meditating means you're really focusing and intently focusing on what you're reading. So, and this happens in many forms. It happens when we're reading Quran, coming to Quran study. I can come to Quran study, but obviously this is better for us than not going to Quran study, but I noticed for myself, I would go to Quran study and I'm not even there. I'm not present. Just like when I'm reading the Quran, I'm not actually reading the Quran, or when I'm praying, I'm not actually being reverent to God. And God tells us, who is your God? And your God is whoever or whatever occupies your mind most of the time. And another way to know who your God is to remember God frequently and glorify him day and night. And, we have the appendix. We know there's many ways to do this. This includes saying mashallah, glorifying God when you see something beautiful, saying God willing, remembering God the first second you wake up. But what I notice is that these things happen so often in my life, it's like my brain isn't stimulated by what I'm saying. And there's two big issues with this. Parroting phrases promote shallow thinking, and the casual use of common phrases can leave the value of what's being said obscured. So for instance, I notice I append mashallah to the end of a sentence without it. It's code. It's like if compliment given, then say mashallah. It almost just becomes this habitual thing. I don't even think about it. And then something as powerful as God is running everything, we know how important this is to our lives. God is running everything. I mean, it is a lifestyle. And I hear it so often, and I say it to myself, but it's like, am I believing it? I don't think I was. Actually, a trick that I try to do is if I restructure or rephrase it, instead of God is running everything, because I'm sure a lot of people here, you have your daily reminders every hour. I notice I just kind of I just get it and I turn it off. Maybe I'll say it, but it's not really triggering a thought. What I did was, maybe if I could change the way to make me think about it from another perspective, instead of God's running everything, nobody does anything. No human being has any power. Every guy in here who has been on the job hunt has in some way accidentally committed idol worship. And this is something I feel I definitely resonate with, and a lot of you have. It's that nobody can do anything for you except God. So, to go back to namaz, I want to talk about what God says about being reverent. And keep in mind, reverence means a deep respect for something, a deep respect. In 23, 1 and 2, it says, successful indeed are the believers who are reverent during their contact prayer salah. And then in 23, 57 to 61, surely those who are reverently conscious of their Lord and who believe in the revelations of their Lord and who never set up any idols beside their Lord, as they give their charities, their hearts are fully reverent, for they recognize that they will be summoned before their Lord. They are eager to do righteous works. They compete in doing them. So I thought, we do our namaz 5 times a day. We repeat the same thing 17 times a day. And when you focus on what you're saying in this namaz, it's a phenomenal prayer. But we say it so often, I feel like we hardly ever think about what we're saying in this prayer. So I thought it would be good for us to go through each line of the namaz or the key. And maybe if we can create strong correlations between what we're saying, it'll help us be reverent while we do our namaz, God willing. So the first thing we say is Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. The first thing I think about is God is the most gracious. He gives us more than anything can possibly give us. This phenomenal, by God's leave, God forbid I ever take this community for granted. This is one of the biggest blessings. Obviously, receiving the message is a huge blessing. And then, if anyone here has ever had trouble falling asleep because you're just laying in your bed and everything that happened that day is running through your head, this is how I am. I don't know if anyone else is this way. I guarantee you, if you just lay in your bed and count every blessing you can think of, first of all, it's a great way of being appreciative of what God has given you, but it's like counting sheep, but being reverent at the same time. Anyways, you'll never run out of things to thank God for. And then God being the most merciful. God will forgive you for anything beyond anyone is humanly possible. Like it's unfathomable to the extent that God can forgive us. In 35:45, God says, if God punished the people for their sins, he would not leave a single creature on earth, but he respites them for a predetermined interim. Once their interim is fulfilled, then God is seer of his servants. Praise be to God, Lord of the universe. When I think about this, when I'm saying this, the first thing I think of is that the entirety of the 7 universes are in God's hand, in one of God's hands. The messenger describes the first universe that it is so large, a number cannot encompass it. The first universe, yet there are 7 universes surrounding it, each one before it smaller than the one after. And to think that this all fits in God's hand, so this is God, Lord of the universe. And I have this verse, 39:67. They can never fathom the greatness of God. The whole earth is within his fist on the day of resurrection. In fact, the universes are folded within his right hand. Be he glorified, he is much too high above needing any partners. And then, most gracious, most merciful, the master of the day of judgment. And for me, what this triggers is the thought that, like, this life does not matter, and that there will be a day where God will judge and decide where we go. And this is the afterlife. And I think one of my biggest flaws is forgetting that there is an afterlife. Like, obviously, I recognize that there is heaven, but is what I'm doing in this life helping me get to the next life? Especially at, like, this stage in my life right now, there's so much happening, planning a marriage, establishing a career, etc. Like, these things take over. But, like, it's always reinforcing and remembering that the most important thing is getting to heaven, inshallah. And I have a couple verses. 3:185, a great triumph. Every person tastes death. Then you receive your recompense on the day of resurrection. Who misses hell barely and makes it to paradise has attained a great triumph. The life of this world is no more than an illusion. 31:33. O people, you shall reverence your Lord and fear a day when a father cannot help his own child, nor can a child help his father. Certainly God's promise is truth. Therefore, do not be distracted by this life. Do not be distracted from God by mere illusions. You alone we worship. I'll read these verses first. Who is worthy of worship? 30:40. God is the one who created you. He is the one who provides for you. He is the one who puts you to death. He is the one who resurrects you. Can any of your idols do any of these things? Be he glorified. He is much too exalted to have any partners. And then devotion to God, indivisible. God did not give any man 2 hearts in his chest. That there is nothing ever worthy putting next to God. Especially when I read this verse, devotion to God is indivisible. I think any person in here, I've talked about this before, but it's tricky when you have a strong passion or desire to do something because it will encompass you and your being, like every being. I mean, it's something I think all of us have to learn and go through, but this verse, God did not give any man 2 hearts in his chest, is so powerful to me for this reason, because it makes me realize that these things that I think I love really have no importance. And then you alone we ask for help. 27:62. Who is the one who rescues those who become desperate and call upon him, relieves adversity, and makes you inheritors of the earth? Is it another God with God? Rarely do you take heed. Happiness now and forever. If anyone thinks that God cannot support him in this life and in the hereafter, let him turn completely to his Creator in heaven and sever his dependence on anyone else. He will then see that this plan eliminates anything that bothers him. And then lastly, hold on. Okay, cool, perfect. Guide us in the right path, the path of those whom you blessed, not of those who have deserved wrath, nor of the strayers. This verse scares me a lot. For one reason, my dad. And I think about, ask my brother, like the moiety gene is a little scary. Like, uh, and to have been so close to something like what I went through, it really made me realize, like, Kamran set a great example for me to be like, you can't even come close to this. You can never have issues with other believers. You can never let your ego get in the way of anything. I'm diverging a little, but the point is that I constantly ask God, please guide me, and please do not let me fall on the same path as the strayers. In 3:101, how can you disbelieve when these revelations of God have been recited to you and his messenger has come to you? Whoever holds fast to God will be guided in the right path. At this point, let's repent. Tubu ilallah. All right. Alhamdulillah, ashhadu la ilaha illallah wa la sharika lah. Praise be to God. I bear witness there is no other God beside God, and he has no partners. So that wraps up my first sermon, Autopilot submission. This second sermon, I had actually began writing it a long time ago. I never got the chance to actually give it, however, and I thought this would be a good opportunity to do so. So I read this book. It's called The War of Art, and it was written by this author, Stephen Pressfield. Its like target audience was for creatives, but I recommend anybody who is seriously trying to pursue something to read this book, because not only do I think it gives phenomenal advice, it very strongly mirrors sentiments that are said in the Quran. And I want to start by reading this quote. Resistance is the most toxic force on the planet. It is the root of more unhappiness than poverty and disease. To yield to resistance deforms our spirit. It stunts us and makes us less than we are and were born to be. If you believe in God, and I do, you must declare resistance evil, for it prevents us from achieving the life God intended when he endowed each of us with our own unique genius. As soon as I read that, I was like, I got to give a sermon on this. So he goes on to say what elicits resistance. And when I read this list, you see there's so many parallels between what he's saying and what is said in the Quran. And this list included any program of spiritual advancement, any course or program designed to overcome an unwholesome habit or addiction, education of every kind, any act of political, moral, or ethical courage, including the decision to change for the better some unworthy pattern or thought or conduct in ourselves, the undertaking of any enterprise or endeavor whose aim is to help others, any act that entails commitment of the heart, and the taking of any principled stand in the face of adversity. And he says, in other words, any act that rejects immediate gratification in favor of long-term growth, health, or integrity. Or, expressed another way, any act that derives from our higher nature instead of our lower nature. Any of these will elicit resistance. And I don't know if any of you are making the correlation of what I think resistance is, but I'll get to it. This verse here, 42:36, whatever you are given is no more than temporary material of this life. What God possesses is far better and everlasting for those who believe and trust in their Lord. And I thought that paralleled really well with any act that rejects immediate gratification. Anything we do in this life does not equate for the long run, essentially. So, resistance is our jinn, is what I'm getting at. He says these things, it's like literally resistance translates to what our jinn tries to do. He says resistance will tell you anything to keep you from doing your work. It will perjure, fabricate, falsify, which just means that's a bunch of different ways of saying resistance will lie. Seduce, bully, cajole. It will assume any form if that's what it takes to deceive you. And then in the footnote of 716, Rashad says, Satan is a proven liar, and so are his constituents. Resistance will lie to you. And then Stephen Pressfield goes on to say, it will reason with you like a lawyer or jam a 9mm in your face like a stick-up man. Resistance has no conscience. It will pledge anything to get a deal, then double-cross you as soon as your back is turned. If you take resistance at its word, you deserve everything you get. Resistance is always lying and always full of expletive. But look at this verse. It says, resistance will lie and deceive you and stab you in the back. And then in 59:16, God says, they are like the devil. He says to the human being, disbelieve. Then as soon as he disbelieves, he says, I disown you. I fear God, Lord of the universe. SubhanAllah. So I wanted to go over some of God's commands and how our jinns will try to lie and deceive us. Like our jinns will try to encourage us, resist us from giving to charity. They'll try to encourage us to lie, to control, or get out of a situation. They will convince us to try to break our chastity, to not keep our promises, to hold negative feelings towards other believers, to not kill our ego, to procrastinate with our namaz, and to prevent us from fasting. So I want to go over a couple of these things. Before I do that, actually, I want to say that I want to emphasize that obviously to not listen to this resistance is the difficult path. And God describes this in Surah 90. We created the human being to work hard to redeem himself. Does he think that no one will ever call him to account? He boasts, I spent so much money. Does he think that no one sees him? Did we not give him 2 eyes, a tongue, and 2 lips? Did we not show him the 2 paths? He should choose the difficult path. Which one is the difficult path? The freeing of slaves, feeding during the time of hardship, orphans who are related, or the poor who is in need, and being one of those who believe and exhorting one another to be steadfast and exhorting one another to be kind. These have deserved happiness. The people who push beyond resistance, the people who deserve happiness. So I'll start with charity. Like our jinns could try to whisper to us like, you're not in a position to afford being charitable. Like it's not wise, you should be like cautious with your money. And it's funny that there's a verse addressing this in 975 and 976. Some of them even pledged, if God showered us with his grace, he would be charitable and would lead a righteous life. But when he did shower them with his provisions, they became stingy and turned away in aversion. And for me, honestly, Makan has always set the precedence for me. This guy gave more than any of my friends, by God's leave, one of the most helpful people I've ever met, and God got him the job at Google, mashallah. A great precedence for all of us. This is a big one. Driving a wedge. I feel like this is one that resistance really does a good job with. Your jinn or the resistance can be like, you don't have to apologize. Like what they did was so messed up. Like how horrible. But we know that a wedge between believers is Satan's last claim against us. Like, once he sees the believers have accepted the message and they've accepted it fully, that the last thing he will try to do is pin us against each other. In the verse 1753, God says, tell my servants to treat each other in the best possible manner, for the devil will always try to drive a wedge among them. Surely the devil is man's most ardent enemy. And I have this quote from Rashad. He says, believers are brothers and sisters and are one family, so Satan does his best to get in the way. Lying. I didn't have any verse to articulate exactly what I wanted to say, but our jinns can be like, if you lie, you can get out of this situation like on good terms. Or if you lie, you can get what you want. We lie because we want to control situations. Like it's clear that we lie because we don't trust that if we tell the truth, the best outcome will come for us. And the first thing, like a huge life lesson for me was I had this interview at Apple Apple Retail. This was a long time ago, but it was a cold day. And actually, I made it past the first round, and I was going for my second interview. And it was cold, and my friend, who is an enormous Giants fan, had this like $200 Giants jacket that was really nice. And only like the true San Francisco Giants fans own these jackets. So he like let me borrow the jacket, so I was wearing it. And I did the interview, not even thinking about the jacket I was wearing. And the interview was going incredibly well, mashallah. And then, truly mashallah, I'm not just going to say mashallah with nothing. And then, you know, it was like the end of the interview, and it started turning into like chit chat, and he was like, "So, Giants fan, huh?" And I was just like, "Yeah." And he was like, "Yeah, it's crazy how like this guy's RBIs are like this," and I'm just like, "I know," and just totally like trying to get through this, like try to pull it off. And he obviously assumed I was a fan because only like true fans wear that jacket. But it was obvious that he read right through me because I never got a call back. So huge lesson. Praying and fasting. Like, just finish this game of FIFA and then go pray or whatever. There's in Appendix 10 of the Computer Speaks, it's funny, subhanAllah, Rashad actually specifically talks about resistance and uses the word when explaining why we have a hard time praying or fasting. He says, the first salat prayer is due every morning before sunrise. At this time of day, the body wants to sleep while the soul needs to get up for morning nutrition. If the person forces the body to get up for salat, the soul will grow a little stronger. Eventually, the soul will be so strong that the body stops resisting and becomes obedient to the soul, the real you. Therefore, the degree of resistance that your body gives you at dawn is one criterion that shows you the degree of your growth. Similarly, when we fast during the month of Ramadan, we are telling the body, you are not going to eat or drink until sunset. Initially, the body will resist, but as the soul grows and develops, the body stops resisting. The extent of the body's resistance to the acts of worship provides us with a measure of our soul's strength, which clearly shows this, that the stronger our souls, the less resistance we'll face. Because the stronger our souls are, the more we objectively identify with God's system. That means that when you are naive and you're not experienced in your submission, you think that you can lie and get away with things. But the more your soul grows, the more these things become like objective facts. Literally like putting your hand in a fire, it's as real as that. You know nothing is worth hurting your soul. You know lying isn't worth it. You know that you will be rewarded for giving charity. You know that your happiness relies on keeping your chastity, etc. And I want to read the footnote of 478. Bad things are a consequence of our own deeds. Though God is the doer of everything, God created the fire to serve us, but you can decide to put your finger in it. We thus hurt ourselves. It is God's law that if you put your finger in the fire, it will hurt. Sorry, forgot to change the slide before I read. And then, lastly, I want to read this because my whole point is that this idea of resistance being our jinn, that we can actually train this jinn to be a believer, and this resistance will evaporate. And this is in the introduction. Every human being is subjected to the incessant persuasions of Satan's representative who lives in the same body from birth to death. Satan's representative tries to convince the human companion of Satan's point of view that God alone is not enough. On the day of judgment, the jinn companion serves as a witness against the human counterpart. Many jinn companions are converted to God's point of view by the human companions. SubhanAllah. At this point, let's pray. Aqim as-salah.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. La ilaha illallah.
something to do Friday prayer. Allahu Akbar. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Malik yawmiddin. Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in. Ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim. Sirata alladhina an'amta alayhim. Ghayri al-maghdubi alayhim walad-dallin. Allahu Akbar. Sami Allahu liman hamidah. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Malik yawmiddin. Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in. Ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim. Sirata alladhina an'amta alayhim. Ghayri al-maghdubi alayhim walad-dallin. Allahu Akbar. Sami Allahu liman hamidah. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum.